Okay, good morning. And I think the session was really to say how to take the consumption story of India forward, for which you need storytellers. And I think we have possibly some of the best storytellers here today. And we'll get to know their views shortly. I think when I was just kind of trying to put together some questions for this panel, and frankly, we are going to listen more to them and less to me. I think the thoughts which are running was something like this. I was in a market in Delhi, and to me, I've come up in a version of retail which had general trade and modern trade, and I could not see anything which was not modern there in the streets. So that was one point which I came to. I was in an office in Bangalore, and they ordered some food from a food delivery platform, and the question in my mind was, who's going to service the atta for that roti chawal which they ordered? They made roti chawal and sent across, but who's going to deliver the atta? Is it going to be Manish here? Or is it going to be some small shopkeeper there next to the cloud kitchen? I think I saw my sons look at the Netflix, and they are on some episode 24 of season 5 of some. So how's really subscription going to shape up? When they're going to pick up stuff, but how? Utne sare subscriptions ho rahe hain, but how are they really going to subscribe for snacks as well? And lastly, I think when we have Seshu on the thing, I think how is really discovery going to change when people are buying e-commerce? I think today e-commerce is no longer a term which is seen as what percentage of e-commerce is a total business. I think everyone knows that everything is somewhere impacted by e-commerce. So really, those were the thoughts running in the mind. And as I said, we have some of the fantastic storytellers around me here. But I'm going to open up the session with something lighter. And I'm going to ask them a memory of theirs, an early memory of theirs when, as early as it's possible, when you're a child, when you're a teenager, when you went and picked something from the supermarket, kirana store, hypermarket, marketplace, something which you picked up which gave you infinite joy. Yeah. So, and I think if all of you like their inputs, please give them a big hand. But I'm going to ask them just as an icebreaker, something which they really got infinite joy when they bought it in their early childhood. So, Manish.
So, being true to general trade, right? So I'm not going to say supermarket. I'm going to say kirana. My mom used to send me out on an errand, and that errand was as basic as saying, get the anda and the bread. So when I used to go to that little, really small kiosk, I would call it a kiosk, and when the guy used to pick up that egg and hold it up in the light and say, yeah, this is a good egg, and that gave me, I don't know, infinite joy, because that was always a wonderment that you look at that egg, it's all fine, and that was my earliest memory of shopping at a mini kirana. So that's where I come from.
Anda and egg, anda and bread.
Bread.
Vivek, for you?
Yeah, I think for me the childhood memory will be to pick up thumbs up bottle, because I know Abhishek is here for the Coke.
Someone's very happy there.
Yeah, I used to save money to buy it.
For me, it was the impulse at the kirana stores, where you basically the bottles of chocolate or small toffees which you used to pick up, open up, and
You pay for them?
obviously.
At times I would skip.
I'll start by thanking Vivek first. So that's a good one. I think for me, the big joy and the liberation was the big aisles and the shopping cart. I think coming from the neighborhood kirana to the modern trade store, or at least the generic parlance, it was a truly liberating feeling to just go around, play around, run around, and then stuff the cart with all kind of colorful packages. I mean, this was of course school days, many years back, not knowing where I will land up eventually, and kind of look at it from the other side. And then going through the negotiation with my mom about things that will go out of the cart, because the budget was always finite. So I think that whole experience was the sheer joy of it.
So thanks, Sadashiv. I think two things I distinctively remember. The biggest delight to see first modern retail, I still remember I was in Jaipur, and there was this big shopper which had opened up much before, which was like the early starts of modern retail. The first delight as a kid was to see a trolley, which was like unimaginable, saying that can you really carry that around and put your shopping stuff into that? So seeing trolley as a synonym for modern retail was the first one. Then in product categories, I remember steamed corn was a great delight, saying that is it something also available in the stores? And as kids, I remember if people would be from the same generation, there used to be some candy which was imported in India, which was called Pop Rocks, which kids used to put in the mouth and used to bubble up. So, which had its own novelty because it was not available. So I think that distinct part of the assortment and that experience of the steam corn and that trolley is the biggest memory I have.
Yes, your memory not belonging to Ratnadeep. Huh?
Yeah, I was just about to say that also. Regarding the thumbs up bottle, right next door where we used to live, a very small kirana shop, so it was always the 10 rupee thumbs up chilled bottle. But again, rightly said, I was already, when I was born, we already started Ratnadeep at that time. So dad and mom used to take me every Sunday, so it was always nice, rationing with them, ki I want this chocolate, that chocolate. But the experience of supermarket itself has been so deeply embedded in the DNA that every memory is a happy memory of a supermarket, be it Ratnadeep or anywhere else. I really enjoy that. So
Sure, thanks. And I think there's a question to the audience, though we don't have time to ask, but just recollect your first memory of picking up. We have anda bread, we have candies, we have pop rock, we have a trolley, and we have 2 thumbs ups here, right? I think so. So those are the points which give these storytellers infinite joy. But do share with your friends around what gave you infinite joy. I think it's always bring you very pleasant memories. So let's start the story with you, Ashutosh, if I may. The consumption story, right? And I think today, okay, the verdict is still out whether multiplexes are back or not, but I think there's consumption happening on-premise, in multiplexes, in talukas, in the kiosk next door, in the modern trade, everywhere. Now, how do you really, and I think Coke always believed in being at arm's length, yeah? And that's what always your spirit was. And the consumption is just taking off now. So from a sheer magnitude and scale and diversity of outlets, what is it that you do as a company, as a leader, to kind of address that? And secondly, I think with this rise of QSR and rise of the food delivery chains, how has it impacted you as a brand? How do you really see that opportunity and cater to it?
Okay, so I think there are multiple elements layered in that question, but I think what you rightly said, Sada, is I think the beverage category, our brands in particular, are the most omni-channel in the truest sense, from a kirana to a modern trade to a cinema to office or for that matter 35,000 feet in the air. I mean, it's pretty omnipresent, and I think the couple of important things which I think we try and make work. One is having internal capability to deal with this omni-channel category. So whether it is the segmented approach with which we look at business, where every channel has a different reality, whether it is the pack price architecture, whether it is the route to market, whether it is the occasions that the channel is catering to, or whether it is the overall execution picture of success. So I think building that segmented approach and building internal capability to be able to service the needs of each and every channel, I think that's a key one. And I think the other key one is really in terms of collaborating with the channel owners and channel partners. I think that's a key one. We truly believe that, we need to have a very customer back outside in approach to really understand what the channel, what the platform, what the shopper needs stand for. And I think the key part really is to co-create what really wins and works in a particular channel. And I think I think some of my colleagues would possibly reflect and agree is that even within a given channel, I think every brand, every format kind of stands for a unique proposition. And for brands like us, the key is to make sure that we are tailoring our mix for each and every retailer, which each and every format, and then sort of went together. So I think just to sum up that point, the two big ones for me would be overall system capability and collaborating with the channel partners and owners.
But you never get a feeling of overwhelmed. You never get overwhelmed seeing so many chances, so many opportunities.
Honest answer, yes, at times, but we have to deal with the overwhelm or kind of but I think that's the fun and joy and beauty of it, right? So I mean, on a lighter note, if I may share, in the good old days when most of us would work only in the GT side of the business. The only place where a market visit would happen is when people from the head office would usually come down to the field, and those are the days one would manage. Now, thanks to e-commerce, on a Sunday morning you have market visits happening and screenshots coming your way, or the channels I spoke about like Airways. I mean, every time people are traveling in and out, there are if I may use mildly, observations and reflections going around in terms of what we could do. So I think that's the beauty and comprehensiveness of the category and the business, and I think a true coming in form of this omni-channel world and presence that we are in. I mean, I'm tempted to take the other one on food aggregators and how it's disrupted. It's a topic by itself, ranging from the economics of the disruption to the convenience of it, of course, which is the very reason it thrives. But I think I'll make way for the rest of the conversation and then maybe jump in later.
Thank you. Thanks. Harsh, I think today, you just go Google out and search for cold cream, and you'll get an entire regime of beauty and personal care, right? And since I've been a little bit on your side, I know it's that long tail can be a boon, it can be a curse. And the long tail, by the word itself, is a bit negative, lamba sa poonch, So how do you approach it? And because now in your role, you do both the physical as well as the omni-channel play. How do you approach it? Is my first question to you. And second, really, I think when you're getting into omni-channel, why wouldn't you just say, okay, let me collaborate with Seshu and just kind of be a partner with him? Why would I need to reinvent the wheel all over again? Is that a question which ever strikes your mind?
Sure. I think brilliant questions, Sarshiv. The first one, let me tell you, the question of long tail, for consumers, it's a great boon. And let me quote a 2004 Chris Anderson study. He used to write for British American journalist, he used to write for Wired magazine. And he figured out that even the last title of song that was there on Napster was at least heard once a month, which essentially meant that entire fad of running after chartbusters, bestsellers, was a very limited game. The only thing that kept consumers coming back to Napster was that anything they wanted to see, to hear, you could always go and find that on Napster. And since then, it's a story. We've seen back and back iTunes come in, we've seen Amazon disrupt the long tail and selection, and Google is the biggest example where you are not advertising on Super Bowl, but you are advertising on a keyboard, and there are infinite keywords. So essentially coming back, for consumers, long tail would always be the best part of the story. And specifically in last 24 odd months in pandemic, the biggest change that has happened is, as consumers, and I was reading this Mintel report, consumers have been exposed to 1.8x more brands than they've been in previous 5 years. And think of it as ourselves as knowledge graph, the brands that you've been exposed to in last 3 years in pandemic, right from the Rage Coffee to Sleepy Owl to this, that, I think the brand graph for exposure has gone up. But that's essentially the biggest conundrum for a retailer, which essentially meant that traditionally modern retail, the fundamental has to be fight the short fat head, right, which we were talking about, which means that everybody wants to sell that odd 5 kg of Ashirwad atta, whether it is within B2B or B2C channels, that's where the demand lies. But that also makes you prone to that vulnerability where you are as away from your core value proposition as possible. So having said that, in the current context of modern retail, and especially Spencer's Retail and Nature's Basket, I believe, and both the brands have been decades old, assortment has been a great part of the story, which, if I see in hindsight, is what has ensured that the customers keep coming back. And if I see it like 5 years down the line, I believe finding your consumer value proposition in terms of appealing to that last audience in the best possible manner within the constraints of brick and mortar, and you could always go omni-channel, is the future. The second question, Sadashiv, I think it's a strategic choice to say that would you want to bank on marketplaces and aggregators to really leverage on their last mile delivery and their scale of technology infrastructure and the platform to be able to reach out to consumers. But as a brand, the fundamental question is, would you let go the consumer acquisition journey and just pass it on to somebody else, because the biggest wealth of any retail business are the consumers themselves. And that's the strategic choice that you would always have. In the short term, I believe, like we see the whole plethora of D2C brands, it is quicker to get your brand more aware, penetrate into markets, establish a certain routing. But in the long term, it's always more return on investment to own the complete consumer journey through your own native platforms.
Thanks. I loved your analogy on search keywords and search in the shopping aisles. And I guess the only thorn in the bush of roses is the fact that customer acquisition data kiske paas rahega, you know? So I have both gentlemen on my side and Seshu included to say let's discuss that. Manish, I'll move to you. You're on my right, so you'll always be right. So the question really is, I think this is the country of shopkeepers. You said that, and I've reserved that question for both of you here. But in your role, what keeps you really awake to say, how do I make sure that the supply side of the business is intact for the consumption story? I mean, they are all brand custodians here and marketplaces who are really creating demand. But what do you do really to maintain the supply side of the story? And the second question to you is where I started the discussion to say, is there anything general about general trade any longer? Because you go and meet many of those. Is there anything general left, anything, or is it really everything is a new modern environment?
Okay, so I'll take the first part of the question. When I look at consumption story overall in India, you gave the example of Ashirwad Atta, right? So when you take Ashirwad Atta and you take a metro city, there is hardly any gap in supply chain. Everybody has access to Ashirwad Atta. Literally nobody runs out of that. So that's the least common denominator. However, when you look at the consumption story, and many of us, we travel pretty extensively, and we travel into the countryside, which is India. So Bharat, literally, you heard of India, Bharat, that's all become jargon. But when you look at reality, I was just talking to some of them. When you travel out of Hyderabad and go down to a place called Zahirabad, then you travel a little further down and just take a right turn on the highway. You come across a village called Hallikhed. And when you see the buzzing power of what that village market wants, and when you see what is the kind of supply chain that is built up, be it brands which have been around for 50 years, 80 years, you realize that there is a certain cost. So if you look at the consumers are really, really upgrading these days. Exposure to the internet, incomes are rising, but the supply side, like I was discussing with you, Sadashiv, there's a big gap there. So rather than focus on the metro cities, it takes a lot of imagination, and India is a country of jugaad. So if you really do classically what the FMCG companies have been doing, that you go the wholesale route, etc., there are only a few brands that will reach. And to his point on assortment, if you really want to look at the long tail, you have to design something which is unique, which is innovative, which is low cost, and yet manages to give that wow to that rural customer sitting in Hallikhed. So when I kind of stay awake, it is about the hugeness of the rural opportunity and how, whether it's our organization or any other organization or any of the brands who have been at it for 50 to 80 years, how do you spur the innovation in supply chain so that you can satisfy the demand? The demand is already there. How do you cater to that demand? How do you upgrade the consumer? Now, do you think a consumer doesn't know what are the varieties of shampoo available? Of course they know. Do they think they can get it easily? No. The shopkeeper himself has to travel 20 kilometers till in rural India to get access to that. He doesn't have credit. So these are the real problems that I and my team sitting here try to solve most of the times, because there the opportunity is huge. It's not in the Bombays and Delhis of the world, that's there. But the bigger opportunity lies in the villages of India, and there are plenty of them. So that's the first part, that how do you spur and how do you really satisfy the consumption by designing a low cost and innovative route. There are many companies, I think I met some of my friends. Somebody like a Dabur uses a Yodha, who's like a rural person who gets into those kind of villages. In some cases, like Shakti Amma project of HUL is there. But these are individual brand specific. When you really go there as an aggregator, that is when you as an organization or some other organization is able to collate all that demand, and then the cost to serve really starts making a lot of difference. So that's the answer on supply chain. on whether there is anything really left in general about general trade, similar to what Abhishek grapples with. So when we look at B2B, we look at Kirana, we look at chemists, we look at salon. When we look at Horeca, surely by name Horeca itself, it is hotels, restaurants and caterers. And beneath that, there are many, many sub-segments of channels. When you talk of institutions, there is a paramilitary, there is a school, there's a religious place of worship, there's a temple. So the amount of merchant categories is bewildering. And ultimately, it's a question of choice that what do you really focus on? What do you do less of, and what do you, focus on in the next 3 to 6 months? So there is nothing left about general trade. Also, I want to give my own example, where let's say I stay. If I want to buy something which is a traditional Indian snack, be it a chivda, or be it a chakli, be it something else, I may not get the best kind of choice, with due apologies, in modern trade. So there I go to that specialty retailer, be it in Bangalore, be it in Mumbai, because I trust that guy for his quality of authentic assortment. When I need something which is like a pasta, or I need celery, etc., then I go to a Nature's Basket. If I want pure value, then there are enough number of value retailers, I won't name them, but there are a lot of value retailers around. So depending on what I need, and if I'm really, really desperate, then of course there are the quick service, quick commerce. So as a consumer, if I am an omnichannel consumer, then when I look at general trade, that general trade, I had my colleague, I think from the earlier panel, 7-Eleven. What is 7-Eleven about? It's about convenience. If at 12 o'clock in the night I need something, I really need something. So I think the distinctions about that this is general trade, this is modern trade, these are the modern trade packs, these are the general trade packs, and there is channel conflict. This is for all of us, whether it is the brands themselves, whether it's the traditional distribution channels, whether it is the new age distributors. It is for us to resolve these conflicts, because frankly, the consumer is not bothered. How do you harmonize everything so that you don't lose that last bit of consumption? That, I think, is the challenge that all of us face, and that's what keeps me awake at night.
Thank you. I think whenever I hear a new city or town of India, आज फिर जीने की तमन्ना हो जाता है, and you just named some town which I had not heard about. So thank you for that. Seshu, I'll come to you. I think the first wave of modern retail saw the emergence of the monthly bazaar and the weekly bazaar and the Wednesday bazaar and something. So various missions got created where people said, come pantry load, come buy more. But you are in a business which says, and he just mentioned, if you want one pack, I'll deliver to you. And there are many people who are now having scheduled deliveries, fixed time deliveries, instant deliveries. How do you see this whole missions emerging in India? Do you think they'll all aggregate, or they'll disperse, saying whenever you buy whatever you want, what you want? How do you see that? And second is really the continuation to what Harsh said. Does really, who owns the customer's data when acquired? Does that really bother you? Or you kind of, it's an open state saying everyone owns the data? So two questions to you.
The first question, which is basically regards this pantry loading. See, broadly, I think, this word called pantry loading is something which is invented by modern retail, and it stays there only. It doesn't go out of this thing. Consumer never pantry loads. Okay, because there are a number of reasons why consumers don't pantry load, particularly in India. One, size of our houses are small. So there is only a certain extent to which you can do pantry load, and in certain family size. Then the second one is, actually, with the nuclear families becoming more and more, or the proportion of nuclear families increasing, okay, the tendency to basically do pantry loading is also reducing over a period of time. So if previously the family size was 6 and now it has become 3 or 4, okay, the pantry loading becomes that much more difficult. So if I have to consume 10 kg of atta, it lasts for 1.5 months or 2 months. So why will I consume more than that? So I think this obsession with pantry loading, which had been there with modern retail, I think is also the Achilles heel of modern retail. Okay, it is the reason why modern retail, the wave never became a tide. Okay, the modern retail stayed within the 10% of the overall market size. I think that largely because we were very obsessed with pantry loading, and we are saying, let us give more together, let us give more discounts on the basket value, so that the customer buys more, etc. Which and let us create Wednesday bazaar and Sunday bazaar and Monday bazaar and all those bazaars. Okay, which actually for the customer it's not relevant. Okay, and the customer's basic buying habits are changing, and they are actually moving towards a direction where they buy in smaller quantities as compared to before. It's not that they don't plan. They still plan their purchases, but they still buy in smaller quantities than before. So trying to actually load more of pantry loading to the customers is not a workable this thing, except maybe in some small categories it works. See, if it is a category which is there, which is not there on top of my mind, and it is a category which occupies less space at my home, there doing some pantry loading works. Okay, so for example, maybe shampoo it worked. Okay, somewhere else it worked because it's a small category. It doesn't take too much of my budget. It doesn't take too much of space. So it's rather I buy it once in 3 months or once in 6 months rather than buying it. So it's more to actually, the customer does pantry loading, more to actually in those categories where you easily forget and where you don't need too much of space and where you don't need too much of budget to actually do pantry loading. So other than that, consumers mostly are moving towards a state where they buy products more frequently or as and when they want. Okay. So it's not that they don't do any planning. They do some planning. They do some planning on a monthly basis. They do some planning on a weekly basis. But they never buy huge quantities of the same product. Okay. So they will buy across the basket. But still, based on the family, it can be a 500 rupee basket. It can be a 1,000 rupee basket. It can be a 2,000 rupee basket. But I don't think, it is a pantry loading in the sense of the word. Okay. And, so the more we internalize that there is, the customers are diverse, and second, there are a larger proportion of customers who are actually moving to buying smaller baskets than larger baskets. It will help us to plan our businesses better and plan our promotions and campaigns and all those things better. Yeah, thanks. There was a second question.
Second question was about customer data.
Customer data.
Would you mind sharing it freely with all your partners?
See, okay, there is a ethical part to it also, which is, a personalized customer data we should not share. Okay, because I think as a human being, nobody likes, okay, my personal data being shared. Okay, so at a group level or a cluster level, sharing data with a partner actually makes sense. So the partner also can do logical things, whether they can supply the right product, right pack size, which pack size they should give, and all that. That you should share, and we should share it as uniformly as possible. So we create in Big Basket what is called a vendor dashboard, where vendor can get all the data in terms of sales, share of the category which each vendor or brand has, and all those things. But personalized data, I think it is not the right thing to do.
It's a good midway you're suggesting. Vivek, to you. आपकी उड़ान तो हम सब जानते हैं. But I think the question really was in this udan, in this flight which you're taking, what's the role of the next generation of entrepreneurs? Because we see in many trades, the next generation of entrepreneurs not wanting to continue that legacy or not wanting to continue that kirana dukan. Of course, modern trade and e-commerce are taking a different shape. But what is your role as a leader to encourage that entrepreneurship? And second, really, is there a Maslow's hierarchy in terms of organizing distribution? Is it that we'll first do FMCG, then we'll come down to staples, then we'll come down to fruits and vegetables, and then some fresh last? So really two questions to you.
No, thank you for the question. I think coming back to the theme of the panel discussion is consumption story of India. If I go back, I think there is only one model which comes to my mind which really drives consumption, which is trade in, trade up, trade across. You either get more consumer, you ask them to buy more or buy different things, right? I think what is really inspiring to me in Udan, and I've been in Udan almost for 3 years now, and we are building this story. I think the game is not about brands. I think it's a very small pie. The unorganized sector in India, if you want to see where food happens, trade happens, go to mandis. If you really want to see where kapra trade happens, go to the markets. It is not, we are just talking niche of it. And I think the role of B2B e-commerce like Udan or technology platform is to really organize the unorganized part. And this is where the entrepreneurs come in. I give you a story, I was in the Nagpur district where there are a lot of rice millers. And they were next generation of these rice miller and said, look, he did an MBA from SP Jain Institute, and he said, what do I do? I said, look, you are very lucky. Your dad has 3 mills. Why don't you make a business out of it, right? To really work it. And then we had a 1-hour session, and I think there were only 3 barriers, which are very common for any big brands. One is accessibility. We've never gone outside this geography, and we don't know how to distribute. Second is our ability to create a brand. And third is, just the rotation of the money. And I think, the encouragement to the next generation entrepreneur is that all these new models or emerging models, some will work, some will not work, they are leading so much of opportunity for consumption, of making unorganized to organized, that it is just massive. So today, for example, in food, the biggest issue is distribution. Forget about the large companies, and I worked for Procter & Gamble for 22 years and led a lot of brands and distribution. And I give you an example. In 2006, I launched Pampers in India. And the distribution of diapers in India was 360,000 stores as per AC Nielsen. And now you go to the stores and you say, maybe it's in millions. And that is the biggest driver of category growth. In Gujarat, women were not using sanitary napkins. At that time, the category was not there. And distribution and accessibility was a big issue. The same issue is in the food. You go beyond certain areas, the retailers don't have access to quality food. There is still 50 kg, 100 kg, 30 kg bags which are selling. There is a huge trend which is going from unorganized to organized. And I think our role of a disruptive channel or an adoptive channel is to really fuel this for the next 10, 20 years. Because otherwise this 5 trillion economy thing is not going to happen. The second thing I would say is the entrepreneur is, I was looking at the GDP data of which states are growing in India. If I would have looked at this data 10 years back, you would not have Assam there, you would not have Madhya Pradesh there, you would not have Bihar there, you would not have Northeast there. And there is real money there. There is real consumption story to be had. One of our helper in Bangalore, she went for a vacation to her house for 1 month, and I came back, I said, कुछ बदला वहाँ पे, आप 3 साल बाद COVID में गए. And she said, सब कुछ बदल रहा है. Infrastructure is increasing. I went in flight, I went to Jorat airport and then moved there. It used to take 5 hours, it's taking only 2 hours. So I think there's rapid development, but it gives a huge opportunity for the infrastructure. So I think we are seeing entrepreneurs who are adding value to the products. So a lot of food millers who wants to do value-added products and driving it. They need access of distribution, that is where is there. Credit is a big part, I think you mentioned it as well. Like at Udaan, we have given almost $1 billion of credit to small retailers. And I today when I came to Bombay, I met in Bhandup, one of the boutique store. She now has 3 stores because she didn't have access to capital. And I think, sometimes we startups are seen as wasting capitals. But I think utilizing that capital and helping the access is going to be a big one. So I see a huge part of the story to do that. I think on your hierarchy question, if you really ask me, and I share my experience, I was in Australia leading P&G business there, and one of the retailer, Woolworths, their CEO, Brad Banducci, told me, we started a store work, and he said, this is your bread and butter. And that was the fresh and vegetable aisle. And he said, this is where my customers come in. If they don't come in, your Pantene and your Head & Shoulders will never sell, right? So this is the bread and butter. So give me the feedback on this. I think what my learning is, the staples is bread and butter for the retailer. In fact, we did a recent survey and analysis, and I was actually humbled that in almost 30% of the retailers who have Udaan app, we are their biggest supplier versus any brand. Because, we are selling them oil, we are selling them sugar, we are selling them pulses, we are selling them other things. And it is a matter of time, we are the biggest supplier. So we have a huge responsibility to influence the consumption trends to really come out of this. So I don't think there is a hierarchy. I think there is definitely a need which is not solved. Sure. So in the unorganized, the problem is not solved yet of assuring quality, assuring returns, regular delivery, price transparency and other things. And that adoption is very high. I must tell you, the deeper I go in India, easier it is to adopt technology. I think in e-commerce, because the price transparency is there, the trust is there, and once people start using app, and thanks to a lot of other initiatives where people have apps, and COVID actually accelerated it because the Arogya Setu app, people know what it is, or even elections, the people have gone for digital app. Modi app is very popular in UP and all. So at least it's no more a thing. So I think a combination of both is going to be a very critical. So just to close it, I don't think the story will start with the brand. I think a lot of time brands evaluate this story as this channel is not, I don't know, it's a conflicting channel, big, I don't know whether I work on this. I would put it the other way around. I think 10 years from now, millions of retailers will rely on these kind of technology disruption, and that will play a big role in consumption.
Fabulous example. I think you should write a blog on MBA to milling of rice. I think it's a great story you said. Yash, the youngest on this side, you kind of creating an interesting model where you're owning up one city, one state, and I think you've done a fantastic job there. What are your thoughts when you actually go expanding, let's say to Assam or Jorhat, to cater to the customer which Vivek just mentioned? How are you going to really span up? What are your thoughts about how do you kind of let go of control? How do you build a localization? And second, really, does stickiness of customer bother you? I think many of the people constantly mention stickiness as a theme. Does it really bother you in light of all the other competitors sitting here with you?
I'd like to answer the second question before. Stickiness of customer for a neighborhood high street store is very important, and we need to keep getting them back to the store again and again. So, as Manish was also saying, there are multiple channels now. So, customer really doesn't care how they're getting what they want. So, what is that uniqueness that you are giving to them? See, for our format, like typically 4,000 to 6,000 square foot format, customer has a reason to come back to us for the fresh produce, the sort of range we carry in the fresh produce, the sort of range we carry in our chillers, like the perishables and all. So, vis-a-vis with the industry, we are doing almost 30% of contribution from these two categories, and that's when we are able to maintain that stickiness, and through these categories we are able to maintain our bottom lines as well. So I think stickiness is important for a chain like ours. And then as the bigger question that is looming over our head is how do we take it forward, right? Because there is a huge opportunity in the country for this this sort of quality format as well. See, so as owners, as management, we have to let go of control. We have to start, see, when a brand is recollected as a regional chain, or when you're stepping out, you have to start tailoring your entire strategy outside of Hyderabad or outside of Telangana. Like, you have to think that if you're a new brand with this name starting up in a state like Assam, what do you have to do to target that market? You can't, first thing is you have to drop the baggage of the way you've been operating for a legacy for 30 odd years. So that's where I feel like it may be a little challenging, but because we know the business, because we know the trade, how to go about it, we know how to maintain our costs. I think that's very important. Like in retail, when we are operating this size of stores, people don't really think about the costs in detail. Retailing is all about detailing, as we say. So trying to manage the cost in a way where we are making money, and traditionally family run, our focus has always been highly on profitability as well. So we are taking it in a very positive spirit. We are expanding in Bangalore. We are looking at other regions as well. But there will be a lot of strategical changes the way we approach these states. That's about it.
Thank you. So, I don't know if they have time for a couple of questions with the organizers. Yeah, please.
Thank you. I'm Mansi. I'm the founder of Just Deliveries, and we create perishable supply chain. So we are stocking perishables at retailers. One question I had is that, there's a lot of inefficiency in reordering. Brands have to call up the stores or send salespeople. So, when can the reordering efficiency become more automated or easier for brands, so that their salespeople can actually open new stores instead of going to existing stores to take more orders?
I can answer that. I think the retailers can use B2B app. There will not be a need to send the salesperson to reorder, but
Maybe I didn't understand your question. If you could just,
So, for example, brands that send breads, eggs, ice creams, they're stocking at multiple stores. But to take reorders, they have to call the stores or they have to send salesmen. So, since the data is already there, why can't it be automated? And a lot of efficiencies can be created.
Sure. I can talk of our B2B format, but I would like maybe Harsh or somebody else. So I'll tell you what. I think we take complete onus for this. It's surely a journey that B2B players like us have to do. Because if you take the demand and aggregate it, of course it should be possible to get something. We typically work on auto replenishment, etc., which is more tuned to ambient or dry grocery products. That we can manage very well. When it comes to perishable, where the cycle is daily, it's just a journey that we have to take. So no excuses. I think that's something we have to do, because then we have to also order. You're talking about bread, but we are also talking about fresh produce, where there's a complete cycle from the collection center to a processing house to getting it to making sure it's still fresh when it's shipped out, and the demand does fluctuate. So it's a challenge. That's something that is a journey for us to do, but I don't know whether anyone else would like to take that on.
No, I think very rightly said. So I think for most product categories, the automatic replacement works, but for fresh, I think in my experience, what I've seen, it is more locally managed much more well. I haven't seen a centralized system which has a great level of efficiency in auto replenishment or reordering, especially for daily consumption categories. And hence an element of localization. To me, if you look at it from a long-term perspective, it's a tech and a localization kind of a solution, which essentially becomes the best piece to go about it.
Anisha, to let us know if we are time up. Okay, right. So thanks.
Thank you.
I'm just going to summarize.
Sada, one question now.
Yeah, sure.
My question is, with the growth of Swiggy and Zomato, the ready food, where do we look at consumption in the basic categories? To come down or to migrate to what we see in the other European countries?
So we can ask one brand who's there with us. Shutosh, you want to take that? In fact, that was my question to you.
Yeah, I think what's in a name, as long as you get it right.
I'm so sorry.
The good news is we'll all remember. But I think if I was to just answer in a broader fashion, what our experience shows is that the multiplicity of the formats, aggregators in different formats, is only helping increase the pie. So what's getting important is to kind of really tap into the right occasion that each format or platform is addressing, and making sure we are able to kind of customize the mix over there. So that's the broad outlook, but definitely, whether it is food aggregators or say quick commerce or all the different platforms which are there, the overall pie is definitely increasing for sure. Look, I may not be in a position to quote numbers, but at a broader level, answer is no, it's not. So, I mean, there are specific segments, occasions, like I said, which are obviously kind of booming or going up. But the overall pie, like if I was to give you our experience, we are seeing growth across all formats. Yes, there would be disparity in growth. Let's say, I mean, when there is if I was to say the phase when quick commerce was like really taking off, then you would obviously see far more exponential growth there, but it's not coming at the cost of another format. At least that's not been our experience.
Okay, so I'm just going to say, Yash mentioned about knocking on a market as if you're a newcomer. Harsh, I think you said customer is the king, queen. Abhishek, apologies for the name mismatch, but you said segmented approach and collaboration. I think clearly you said, Setu, that customer is going to decide when they want to buy. Pantry loading may be a baggage of modern trade. Vivek, I think you really said MBA to rice miller, that I answered the question one word. And Manish, you said there's a lot of gap which needs to be worked on at the supply. So thanks a lot. I'm sure the audience would have enjoyed all the stories which will take the consumption story forward. A big round of applause will always help them. Yeah.